Welcome back to the show, everybody. For families with kids who thrive on routine, mealtime may be a bit more difficult than usual right now. So here to join us with tips on how to have more successful meal times and how to help kids build better relationships with food are Sarah Remmer and Cara Rosenbloom, registered dietitians and also authors of a new book called Food to Grow On. Welcome to the social.
Thank you.
So I want to start with the pandemic because it really has changed so much about our daily lives and has certainly had an impact on the way we eat. Now, Sarah, you run a nutrition counseling practice in Calgary. Let's talk about the changes that you've seen in family eating patterns over the past year.
Absolutely. Well, I think that everyone has a little bit of extra stress these days, especially when it comes to financial stress and just overall anxiety. And I think that parents are putting a lot of pressure on themselves to, continue serving balanced, healthy meals every day and snacks. But the thing is, those are all sort of falling by the wayside right now. And routine is also falling by the wayside too. And I think, we know that kids thrive off of routine. So if there's one thing I can say is it's not going to look perfect right now, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, Cara, one concept that was discussed, at length in your book was something called the division of responsibility. And it really is the foundation for much of what you've written about, in fact. So exactly, maybe describe for us, what is the division of responsibility and why do you believe it is so important?
Sure. The division of responsibility is a feeding model that was developed by a dietitian in the U.S. named Ellen Satter, and it's been proven for many, many years to work very well. And it helps your children learn to develop a healthy relationship with food, and it helps stop mealtime battles at the table. So many parents these days are just stressed figuring out not only what to feed their kids, but how to feed their kids. So what the division of responsibility does is it gives the parents some responsibilities and roles, and it gives children their own responsibilities and roles. So in the feeding relationship, the parent is responsible, or the caregiver is responsible for deciding what food is going to be offered, deciding when the food is going to be offered, so at a predictable schedule, perhaps breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, and they decide where the food is going to be offered. And that's where their responsibility ends. And then the children come to the table, and they're responsible for choosing what to eat based on the food that's served, as well as choosing how much to eat. And that's a really big one because we find a lot of parents try to manage what their child's appetite is going to look like. And of course, nobody knows how their own tummy feels better than the child. So when we start to use the division of responsibility, we give the control to the child to decide how much they want to eat. And that helps make meal times a little bit more neutral and less problematic and a little bit more pleasurable, positive, and enjoyable.
Okay, wait, I got to push back a little. I have a picky eater. What if she eats one mouthful and it's over?
So what we find with the division of responsibility is it works quite well, especially with picky eaters. Sometimes we find that parents and children have the division backwards, where the parent is micromanaging and trying to tell their children to eat one more bite, and the child is deciding when they're hungry, what they want to eat, and where they want to eat. When that relationship is backwards, we usually find that making a small change and getting back to the right roles for the adult versus the child takes care of that picky eating. And if your child comes to the table hungry, they are most likely going to eat something based on what's served. And if they don't, that's okay too. That's their job to determine what their appetite is.
Sarah, a concept that you really dive into is this one called intuitive eating, which I've been reading a lot about. It's a practice that you've used in your professional and personal life for the last 15 years. Tell us what it is and why it works.
Intuitive eating is a philosophy that was developed by two dietitians in the United States, Evelyn Triboli and Elise Resch. And it's really a mind-body approach to eating. So it's focusing on your physical hunger cues first and foremost when it comes to eating. And I know that a lot of adults don't do that. We use external cues for eating. We eat out of emotion, out of boredom, out of habit, out of, we see advertising and all of a sudden we're hungry. We see food or we smell food and we're hungry. And the thing is, kids are born intuitive eaters. When you see a baby eating, they turn their head when they're done or they cue when they're hungry. And kids have this innate sense of being able to cue to their parents when they're hungry and when they're full. So we need to nurture that as parents. And what happens around the age of about 4 is that kids start to be influenced by external factors, like when mom is pushing, the plate a little bit closer, or asking her, daughter or son to eat 2 more bites when they're already full. So we really want to take the pressure off, and we want to encourage our kids to listen to their tummies. So instead of saying, no, you have to have 2 more bites or you can't have dessert, you might say, what does your tummy say? Is your tummy done eating? And then your kids can really tune into their natural body to say, yeah, my tummy's done. We just really want our kids to we want to nurture that innate ability in our kids, and we want to model that as parents too.
So, Cara, I already asked you earlier, like what if you do have that picky eater and you're micromanaging what they're eating, how they're eating, and you told us that's actually perhaps interfering with the way that they self-regulate. So let's move on from that and ask, so how do we get to that place, that happy place where we can still foster that independence that both of you are talking about and self-regulation, but we do also want to ensure that our kid, is it really true that we can hold on and say, okay, if my kid just doesn't eat a lot right now, they're going to be okay, big picture, long term, even by the end of the day? Because that's this mom going, oh my gosh, she barely ate today. So talk to us about that and trying to see the other side, which is fostering independence at once.
Yeah. I can make it even better than just by the end of the day. How about we look at over a week what a child eats? We do know that there's going to be times where in one meal they're not going to eat everything you as the parent want them to eat. But let's not talk about every single individual meal, because it's not always what you want them to eat. It's what their body needs. And studies show that children have this amazing innate ability to get the nutrients that their body needs. So true picky eating, where children actually are not getting enough food, is not as common as we think. Most parents will describe their children as picky at one time or another. And because it's so common, we like to say that picky eating is normal. And if you think about it from an adult perspective, there's times when you're more hungry at a meal, times where you eat less at a meal. There's certain foods you like, certain foods you don't like. So it's normal for adults, and it's okay for that to be normal for kids too. Overall, we do know that if kids don't eat a ton of food, or you want them to eat at one meal, it's totally fine, because over the course of the week, they're probably going to get everything they need. There are some outliers, and we talk about in our book children who have extreme picky eating or some kind of eating, disordered eating. So that is something you would talk to a dietitian specifically about. But for the most part, picky eating is normal, and it's a phase that most kids do go through.
Sarah, this book answered a lot of questions about why kids are so prone, like many adults, to favoring sugar, salt, and junk food. We in our house now call it bag food. So a lot of people probably are listening and they have kids who only seem to gravitate towards junk food and eat a lot of them as snacks. How do we wean them off and direct them towards healthier food?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that all of us are turning to those comfort foods right now because they make us feel good temporarily. These foods that have a lot of sugar and that are ultra processed will temporarily give us a release of dopamine in the brain that makes us feel really good and calm and comforted. And so I think that we've gotten into this habit, both parents and kids, of gravitating towards those foods just for a little pick-me-up and a little bit of comfort. And so if we can start teaching our kids how to comfort themselves and soothe themselves in other ways, perhaps going for a walk, maybe calling a friend, FaceTiming, their buddy, going for a scooter ride, something like that. That's a really good way to do it instead of always turning to food, and also providing a nice balance of nutrients at meals and snacks. So that's our job. Like Cara said, one of our responsibilities as parents is to provide the food. We're in charge of the what's. So we need to make sure that most of the food we're providing are whole, real foods, minimally processed, nutritious foods, and that we introduce, those fun, ultra-processed, kind of high sugar, high salt foods once in a while, so that our kids are exposed to them, but they're not relying on them to feel better.
So much of the discussions about eating well, as much as all of us want to aspire to that, is also linked to privilege. And I think that socioeconomic status, for example, even accessibility to some of the fresh produce, cost of some of this food. So Cara, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are and how we can foster a more inclusive approach to healthy, balanced, whole eating for all families.
Certainly the million-dollar question, and there has to be something from the national, federal level, from the provincial and municipal level to tackle this, because certainly access to healthy, tasty, and affordable food is a basic human right for all Canadians. And I do know many of my dietitian colleagues spend their time working on trying to solve this awful problem that we have. We do address this in our book, Food to Grow On, and we say that nutrition should be equal and accessible to all, and we do not judge foods or label foods as good or bad because all foods can fit. And we do write in the book, we have some charts and graphs about finding foods that are both affordable and nutritious. So looking when you're grocery shopping for things like oats and barley and beans and lentils and tofu, and we talk about which vegetables and fruit are more affordable, and relying on frozen and canned foods, which is totally nutritious and delicious and healthy. And we also provide for people who are in need access to different Band-Aid solutions until we have a national solution. So things like food banks and community centers where there is help if needed. And that's all outlined in the book as well.
Cara Rosenbloom and Sarah Remmer, thank you so much for joining us today and giving these great tips for parents.
Thank you for
Welcome.
having me.
Thank you.
Food to Grow On is available now. Get yourself a copy and we'll be right back.